Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of World War One for AP Euro. In specific, you can apply it for AP World, but this section and the way I do World War One for this PowerPoint is specific for concepts that you'll see in AP Euro, which you wouldn't necessarily see as much on AP World or even in A-Push. Okay, so there's a couple of things, because World War One is World War One. You can't teach it any other real way because there are just facts that are intertwined of who won World War One, the alliance systems, and so forth. So as the World War One continues, these are the major battles that you'll probably see pop up, if anything, talking about the carnage and death for AP Euro. Here, this is basically something more of a concept of America's entrance into World War One as the war widens, meaning there's more players being involved. And this all starts off with America's involvement, because remember, at the time, there's going to be France, Britain, and Russia on one side, right? And then on the other side, it's going to be Italy, Germany, Austria, Hungary, right? That's one country to put together, right? Now, adding America into this side of the alliance system is probably going to outweigh them, right? But there's a problem, is that one of them in this side, Russia, actually has like a nervous breakdown, I like to say, and needs to pull out because it's not ready for a world war with modern tech in it, right? Industrialized war. They are really old school, and that's a theme that I always go through all my PowerPoints and all my videos with my students, of how to kind of cover that, and that's just something just to know about Russia, and I'll cover it later on in other videos and stuff like that. So what ends up happening is that there's this thing called the Lusitania. Right now, the war continues. There's two major factors of America's involvement in World War One. Really, what gets them involved. The first is the Lusitania, and then there's the Zimmerman telegram. The Zimmerman telegram is not as much as a focal point for AP Euro, but it's something to know. But we'll cover just the Lusitania because it gives you a more specific thing to talk about, a symbolic actual sinking. And basically the story of the Lusitania is as Germany is using its new tech of submarines to stranglehold Britain, right? Because submarines would pop up out of the water, and Britain is surrounded by water, so Britain would get most of its resources coming in through boats, shipping lanes, and so forth to keep Britain going. Now, one strategy Germany creates during this time is to have the U-boats, these submarines, pop up out of the water, hit the actual trading ships that are going into England, and they're doing this in hopes to stranglehold England, right? Now, this is why this is important. How this pertains to Lusitania is that during this time there were passenger ships, right? People are moving back and forth on these passenger ships, and there weren't really any rules to war. So let's say you're an American at this point in time in the 1900s, and you want to go to Europe, and there's World War One popping off. You can go to Europe and you can travel around like it's it's all cool and stuff, right? So the problem is that one of these passenger ships, the Lusitania, is circling around Europe during a war where German U-boats are popping up trying to hit actual merchants and it's not merchants, but like ships that are basically holding contraband of military tech, bringing into England, trying to stranglehold because they're in a war. And you have these passenger ships that are rolling around, and one of the major things is that there's Americans involved that are on the Lusitania that actually gets sunk. Okay, so America's first had sympathy for the war. They wanted to join the war. We were all pumped up, but there was no real reason to join World War One until this first major thing pops off. Previously, Britain and France established a naval blockade to strangle the Central Powers. In retaliation, Germany basically did its own blockade of England with its U-boats, as I was talking about. And then in May 1915, German submarines sank a British passenger liner, a British transportation ship of people called the Lusitania. Now, on it, and you can see here, more than 1,000 lives lost, and out of those 1,000 lives, 139 were United States citizens. So now, Americans are dying in a world war that was only connected to Europe, right? Primarily the major players. During this time too, as the war starts to widen, Britain has plans to basically do something with the former crumbling Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is the last remnants of the Islamic Empire and the traditions of these great ancient empires. You know more about it in world history than you would in AP Euro if you're just starting in AP Euro focal point. But the Ottoman Empire is the lands that are in the Middle East and places like Turkey. You can think of it like that. That basically it's a crumbling ancient empire, and it's involved in the essence of what's happening in World War One. Now, while World War One is going on, the British and the French are realizing that there's all this land and area, and they're kind of like figuring out what could they possibly do with this claimed land once they kind of realize maybe if they basically they beat the Austria-Hungary, Germans, and the Italians, like they take over this land because the Ottoman Empire was supporting them. So what would happen to this area? So this is called the Balfour Declaration, and what basically was written by this British Secretary Arthur Balfour. And the whole purpose of this is that they basically say that lands would become Palestine, and they would create a home for the Jewish people that have been kind of misplaced forever in Palestine. This is basically the creation of Israel in the Middle East, in the places that you think of, issues kind of popping out today between Palestinians and Israelis, and that kind of whole thing kind of all is created through finding this like Zionist mission of where to place the Jewish people, and it's something that's been kind of like thought after forever, and this is kind of like a place to kind of settle them in. The home created a place of no discrimination, and a right of non-Jewish communities living in the region too. They did this in the hopes to appeal to German, Austrian, and American Jews. Okay, Armenian Jews. Sorry, no, American Jews. While others saw this Zionist vision as a Jewish homeland. So literally, this is the creation of Israel, if you want to think of it, kind of be pseudo placed in the Middle East as a side note of what to do with the Jewish question in places of dealing with Jewish discrimination within the lands of Britain, France, also places in all over Europe. Okay, so it's kind of messed up to think about how they're going to be placing it, but it's under the understanding of finding a place for these people from where they're kind of like connected to. And it's important to realize this because it's one of the political aspects of the dynamics that's happening in the Middle East, and it happens ever since World War I and the placement of these people. The final showdown in the Western Front began in 1918. The Germans wanted to achieve a major victory. So basically, the whole story of World War I is that where it starts, it ends, right? And realizing that now Americans are going to be involved in World War I because of Lusitania, and then the Zimmerman Telegram. The Zimmerman Telegram is basically the Americans intercept this telegram, and this telegram is the Zimmerman Telegram, and the telegram literally states that Germany, it's a communication between Germany and Mexico. If Mexico helps out Germany in World War I, then Germany will give Mexico lost lands that they lost to the Americans in like 1812, the Mexican-American War. They will help them regain those lands if they get help in World War I. That's the final straw that really breaks the camel's back for America's entrance into it. So there's a two-phase of it. The reality is for Euro, you're just going to need to know the Lusitania because it's the focal point of what's happening in Europe at the time. Okay, so now what's happening is Germany realizes that the Americans are going to be involved in World War I, and before they get involved, they're like, look, we need to just go all out or nothing. So what they do is they basically put all their energy up into 1918, and they basically do this huge push to basically push the Triple Entente 40 miles deep. And remember, 40 miles in a war of interest is massive, so this is going to be like a major push of all the effort. And they're trying to do this to finally knock out the French, and doing this in hopes that they can quickly do it before the Americans show up and basically turn the tide, because they see that that's a potential of happening. They do this, they push back, but reality exhausts the troops, And at this time, the French are launching a counterattack. And as this is happening, American soldiers are now arriving by the thousands. William II, at this point, realizes that the war is now being lost. It's going to be pushed back into Germany. Now they're going to be squeezed. He abdicates his throne, and socialist leaders in Berlin proclaimed a republic on November 9th and agreed to tough Allied terms of surrender. So basically, World War One ends after this great push. I'm not doing it justice in the sense of what's happening to it, but it's kind of like they just push in to France a little deeper. They get pushed back across Belgium, back where they came from, the Schieffelin plan in reverse, and they end in their own area. And it's basically the repercussions of World War One and the involvements and the issues that go along with World War One are more important than actual World War One really starting and the issues that happened. Now the German United crumbled, and basically they start armistice. They signed an armistice and agreements fighting, and on November 11th, 1918, and the Great War was over. So it kind of started where it started with the Schieffelin plan, and it kind of ended where it ended with back where the Schieffelin plan started. But the dynamics of what it created and the issues that it left are felt to today and from World War One. Okay, so that's why it's an important thing to know. That's a sound of silence. You can listen to it if you get the PowerPoint. So the Paris Peace Conference. What to do after World War One? Now this is actually as kind of crazy as it sounds. This is more important in the the historical context of how this basically leads Europe for the next 100 years or so, because it kind of goes like a domino effect after this. So the three winners, the big three, right, have conflicting ideas of what to do of after World War One, because they realized they won. Wilson was dominating the peace conference, Woodrow Wilson, and two other allied arms. So British Prime Minister David Lloyd George wanted to rebuild Britain because it had been decimated through the process of World War One, bombings by Zeppelin planes, the stranglehold by the Germans. The French leader George Clements wanted to weaken Germany so much so that they can never basically attack France again. Okay, and historically speaking, in Europe, they had a kind of a point of doom. That is the kicker of what they do with Germany after that really just leaves the world open. So this Treaty of Versailles is the one to know for European history. Okay, the Treaty of Versailles basically has inferences of, it involves your life today because you can kind of go through the historical dominoes and feel it out. So on June 1919, what they do, representatives from the new German Republic, so Germany surrenders, they create a very kind of pseudo government to kind of take over, kind of because basically William II abdicates, and they kind of set up like a makeshift government. And what happens at the Treaty of Versailles is basically what creates issues for decades later. So the Germans were horrified at what they had to actually sign at this. First off, that they assume all blame for World War One, causing World War One. So they have to say that everything that happened in World War One, from the Lusitania to the fighting of the French to pushing back to death, all their problems, it was all their fault. No one else was to blame. So that's kind of like just an insult to injury that, like, you have to kind of like, you have to tell your parents, like when your parents see you do something wrong, and then they kind of say what you did wrong. Like they put you on that pedestal to say what you did wrong. That's just like insult to injury, right? Like you already know, everyone knows, but like to make you say it, it just feels like that much more horrible. The second big kicker is they have to pay these huge reparations. Now, this is the financial hole that Germany's put into that leads to the way of World War II. So these reparations, basically a reparation is any damage that was caused in World War I, the Germans have to flip the bill. They have to pay for the damages. Now, not only do they have to pay for the damages of World War I, like the buildings and the places and so forth, right? um, they have to pay for their own widows, right? Because now German soldiers were men, right? So the German men would go off to fight, the German British, the German French. They were all men going off to fight. When they died, at this point in time, they're the major breadwinners of the family. So the widows and the families, the kids, had to be supported by governments to kind of like stay alive, right? Because there was no real income coming in. So Germany has to pay for their own widows because it's Germany, right? So they have to pay for their families that have lost the breadwinner of their families. Not only do they have to do this, they have to pay for every other family of Britain and France that had lost a family member that was a male, that was a contributor of the breadwinner of the family. They have to pay for those people too. They put them in this most impossible debt that basically leads them to doing crazier stuff later on, like the rise of a dictatorship because of this financial burden that's placed on Germany from World War One. Now, why did they do this? Is that it's kind of like in a game, like you think of Monopoly or whatever. You lose, you're the loser. You pay for everything. You're the loser, right? It's a game kind of thinking, right? It kind of makes sense. In the game of real life, if we just had a fight or people got into a war and now the people that lost the war, you punish them even more, you're just leaving a vacuum, a hole for something else worse to kind of grow out of. Because you're putting them in a place, in a part of negative, like you can never, ever, ever dig out, right? Kind of thing. I think, what was it, in 2000, the 2010s is actually when Germany finally paid off these reparations, which they actually paid. It took them over about 100 years to pay off these reparations, and they finished paying them off, actually. So it's about $2.7 trillion today. It was $30 billion in 1919 money, where, like, a quarter, you can go to the movies and get popcorn and have change left over with a quarter. And that's $30 billion in that time frame, not today's money. Today's money, that's a lot of money, right? So this makes it worse. This makes more sense. The Treaty of Versailles, signed by the Allies in Germany, Britain towards Alsace and Lorraine were returned to France, and Polish territories were returned to Poland. Germany had limited its army and built no military fortifications. So the reparations are huge, because reparations are really what pulls into the Great Depression and World War II. There's also lost lands that the Germany loses during World War I. Alsace and Lorraine were returned to France. These are from the Austro-Hungarian wars from previously in European history, which I'll cover in another video. But reality is that they lose these lands. They lose Polish territories to Poland, obviously. And then this is the other one too. They're not allowed to build up their army or their military fortifications ever in World War I. Why is this important? These are the two moves that Adolf Hitler utilizes in the age of dictatorships, right? The rise of Adolf Hitler. He basically doesn't pay those payments, the reparations, and he rebuilds the army, which was told not to do after World War I. Those things really are the stepping stones for Adolf Hitler's rise to power. They accept the horrible war guilt clause. They declared that they were completely paid for everything, and crippling debt. Even so, German socialists signed the treaty in Louis the 16th Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the same place where Bismarck had signed his agreement. So Otto von Bismarck, some person will cover in another video, basically humiliated the French by having them sign a peace agreement, losing their land to Alsace-Lorraine in Louis the 16th's palace of the Hall of Mirrors. It's kind of like an insult to injury. And now they're having the Germans sign their same the same loss of World War I in the House of Versailles, which is the same kind of treatment. Thank you very much for watching this PowerPoint, for watching this video. Like, subscribe, all that jazz, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll continue this in part 4.